guys, it's Casey, and today I'm going to talk to you about 5 new releases that I'm anticipating for the end of the year. So we're coming into the end of the year, but there are definitely some really cool books that are going to be released in October, November, and December. So some of these are continuations of series that I've already started and maybe talked about on this channel before, and some of these are books from authors that I'm familiar with, and some of them are ones that I've just heard of from other sources that the premise sounds really cool and I'm excited about. And I think all of these are either sci-fi or fantasy, so staying on brand. So the first one is kind of cheating. Technically speaking, this comes out before this video goes up. So this book comes out on September 15th, which I think is the day before this video will go up. Mostly I just want an excuse to talk about it because it is the new release that I'm probably the most excited for the rest of the year. It's close if it's not. Is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. So Christopher Paolini is the author of The Inheritance Cycle, which is a pretty well-known fantasy series. Now, I never actually read that one, but I knew a lot of people who did, and I know it's super popular. But this is apparently his first book released since then, and it is a massive sci-fi book. It's like over 900 pages long. So I don't know a huge amount about this story, but I know it follows our main character Kira, who finds an ancient relic that I think is either sentient or AI or somehow different, but I know it's kind of a first contact story. And I know that during the events of this book, war breaks out across the galaxy, and it kind of discusses like the fight for humanity's survival. So I know that it follows some pretty typical tropes that we find in like epic space opera type sci-fi, but from the early reviews I've heard of it, it is very, very good, and I haven't read a sci-fi book that was that big and expansive before. A lot of my sci-fi has been like softer, smaller scope sci-fi, and I really want to get into that bigger space opera type of stuff. And I figured this would be a really great place to start since I've heard that it's been getting really good buzz, and also it is the first entry into what Christopher Paolini is calling the Fractalverse. So the Fractalverse is a greater universe kind of equivalent to Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere that all of the stories from this point on are going to take place in, but it is very large in scope of time and location, so there are lots of different stories that can be told in this setting. But I have heard that To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is a self-contained story and you can be perfectly happy reading just that, but also that it does a good job of setting up this broader universe, which is always something that I love. Plus I need more standalones to read, even if that standalone is about 900 pages. Also, typically I don't listen to audiobooks that are that long. However, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars is going to be narrated by Jennifer Hale. Jennifer Hale is a fantastic voice actress who plays, most notably to me personally, Commander Shepard in the Mass Effect trilogy, which is my favorite games of all time and forever. So I would love to hear Jennifer Hale narrate a space opera to me, even if that means the audiobook is going to be like almost 30 hours long. Okay, so getting into the 5 that aren't actually already out yet, and the first one of those is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which comes out on October 6th. So I know The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is probably on a ton of people's most anticipated releases lists. Victoria Schwab is a super well-known author and very popular on BookTube. And I personally have only read 3 of her books. I've read the Shades of Magic series and I really enjoyed those, so I've definitely been looking to get more into her work. And this one, which I believe is a standalone, seems like another great natural progression for that. So The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is about this woman named Addie LaRue who makes a bargain to live forever. However, the catch is that everyone that she meets will forget her. No one ever remembers that she exists. But I know that this story follows her in kind of a historical setting, and as she progresses through her life, when then someday somebody calls out her name and remembers her, and I think it kind of goes from there. And I don't know for sure, but that sounds to me like it might have a really fun romance plot in it, and I know that there's some really interesting fantastical elements, and it's about Addie LaRue wanting to leave her mark on the world even though she's doomed to be forgotten. And that plot sounds so interesting and so good, and definitely something that's like right up Victoria Schwab's alley. One of the things that stood out to me from the Shades of Magic series was I really liked the relationship between Lila and Kel. So I have a lot of hope for this relationship between Addie LaRue and this strange mystery boy who remembers her. I think that could be a really fun dynamic, and I'm really looking forward to reading this one, as I'm sure a ton of other people are too. So another book that's coming out on October 6th is We Were Restless Things by Cole Nagamatsu. And so this is one I've heard significantly fewer people talk about than a lot of the other entries on this list. But from what I know is a contemporary fantasy that follows 3 teens in a very coming-of-age story situation after the wake of a tragedy where one of their friends drowned on dry land. But in reality, the friends realized that he drowned in an impossible lake, which was a lake that only he could find. So this book sounds very magical, whimsical, so I imagine there's a lot of elements of fantasy just set in sort of our world and used to explore contemporary themes, which I really enjoy. It gives me kind of Raven Cycle vibes. I hesitate to say that it reminds me of the Raven Cycle because I haven't read it yet, but I get that kind of vibe from the synopsis about a coming of age, a group of friends around sort of these mysterious magical circumstances, and that is something that I vibe with hard. So I'm really looking forward to it, and the cover looks gorgeous. So yeah, this is one that I haven't heard a ton of people talking about, but I'm excited to check out. And the next one is coming out on October 13th, and that is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. So this is one that I heard Reagan over at Peruse Project mention, but I don't know a huge amount about. I know that it is a historical fantasy, and it follows a group of women who joined the New Suffragist group of New Salem, and those activities slowly start to turn into sort of a more witch coven type activities. So the last line of the synopsis on Goodreads really intrigues me, which is, "There's no such thing as witches, but there will be." And that just sounds so good. I'm usually not a huge fan of historical fantasy. I have difficulties with like historical fiction and stuff like that. So historical fantasy sometimes treads the line for me depending on how much emphasis is put on which parts. But I am down for some mid-October highly witchy vibes. I am down for a Salem Coven story. That sounds awesome to me. And again, cover, gorgeous. This is also the author who wrote the 10,000 Doors of January, which I have never read before, but I know got a ton of buzz and a ton of awards last year, or this year. What is time anymore? It was a really buzzy book, so I have high hopes for this one, and it just sounds like the perfect October read, and I'm very excited. So the next one coming out on November 18th is The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. If you can't tell by the way that my voice immediately changed, I am so hyped for this book. So The Burning God is the third and final, I believe, book in the Poppy War trilogy. So I read the Poppy War back in July or August, something like that, and I actually just finished reading The Dragon Republic like a week or two ago. So I am fresh off of that emotional roller coaster hype train situation. So the Poppy War is a grimdark fantasy series that is set in a world that is kind of modeled after Chinese history. It follows our main character Rin, who in the first book is working to enter a prestigious military academy, and when she gets there she finds that she's being discriminated against because she's a poor, darker skinned woman from the south. So the first half of the book follows her sort of trials through this academy setting. However, the second half of the book takes a pretty dramatic shift and it turns into a very militaristic war story, and that sort of tone follows throughout the rest of the book and into The Dragon Republic. And not to get into like my actual reviews of the books or anything, but I gave the Poppy War 5 stars. It was incredible. The Dragon Republic, I think I haven't rated yet, but I think I'm sitting at a 4.5, maybe still 5, I'm not 100% sure. I liked it a little bit less than the Poppy War, but I still loved it, and I'm so excited to find out how all of this is going to go down. There's still so many like loose ends and plot pieces that are so urgent, and I have to know how this all turns out, so I'm very excited for that one to come out in November. Also, just as a side note, this is R.F. Kuang's debut series, and it is mind-blowingly good. I will pick up anything that she writes from here on out, just full stop. So those are some books that are coming out in the next couple of months that I am very excited for. If you know of any new releases that I didn't mention here that seem like they'd be up my alley, or you're just really excited to talk about, please comment down below because I would love to hear them. But that's all I've got for you guys today. If you want to keep up with what I'm reading, I've got a link to my Goodreads in the description below. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.